Saifullah, what about you? Would you give a quick summary? But I think Saifullah also does not want to, or he cannot hear me. I don't know. Okay, Minashi has joined. Minashi, how are you? A quick summary.
I couldn't join last class.
Okay. Anyone who was in the last class and can give a quick summary? I think Mamuna was there in the last class, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So would you like to give a quick summary, Mamuna? You have all the rights to say no, but if you'll say yes, it will be great.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, biodiversity means it's like a variation of life forms,
Yeah.
and conservation is yeah. So like variation of life forms. So basically, it's a large amount of heterogeneity among life forms in the biosphere, where it's like about 1.3 million, which contains 70% animal kingdom and 70% insects,
Correct.
and then 330,000.
Just sorry to interrupt you, but this 70% insect is out of the total animal species that we have discovered. Okay.
Okay.
So out of 1.3 million species, around 70% of the species are animals, like they belong to animal kingdom. And out of those 70% species that are animals, 70% are insects, almost. So that is just to tell you how diverse insects are on the planet. Okay. Yeah. Continue.
And yeah, so the biodiversity term was coined by Edward Wilson, and then we learned the three levels of biological organization. And so can you scroll up? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So first one was genetic diversity. Basically, this means that a single species which shows high diversity at genetic level around its geographical distribution range. And the second one was species diversity, which was basically compared between two similar habitats. Um, example, Western Ghats having higher African species than Eastern Ghats. Then we studied, sorry, we scroll down.
Yes. Yeah.
The third one was ecological diversity. It was basically the diversity at ecosystem level. And then we studied about patterns of diversity, biodiversity, which was latitudinal gradient, which basically meant that the tropical region, which had a higher biodiversity compared to the temperate region. So, like the order of regions would be tropical, temperate, polar, tundra as well, which is also called. Then we did one question, which was important. Then we learned species area relationship, which basically is defined as the region where species richness increases, and the graph. And then we also learned the equation log S is equals to log C plus Z into log A.
Yeah, it is the basically it's a linearized form of this equation only. S is equal to CA raised to power Z. Okay.
Yes. So S is equal to CA square.
Not CA square, it is CA raised to power Z. Z.
Okay, Z. Okay.
Yeah, so Z is slope of the line, or we also call it as regression coefficient. Okay, so that's Z. So when we when we linearize or when we use log, a logarithmic form, this is called. When we make a equation into its logarithmic form, if a expression is a raised to power z, then we bring this power down, and then log a comes up. So it is log s is equal to log c plus this z comes down, so z into log a. Okay. This is how we write it mathematically. Yeah. And what does this tell? Species area relationship graph?
It basically shows the species richness.
Yes, correct. It shows the diversity of species and how it is connected to the area. that we are studying. And just to finish with this, thank you so much, Maimuna, for this.
Welcome.
Yeah. So just to also add to this, I told you that this hypothesis or this species area relationship tells us that if we increase the area, with increase in area, the species richness will increase. Do you see this green curve here? So with increase in area, the species richness will increase, but up to a limit, after which it will saturate. So this saturation comes up because of this. This is decided by this slope of the line or regression coefficient in nature. So up to a limit, it will keep on increasing and then saturates. But because this line is not a very good line to do analysis on, because different segments of the line have different slopes. For example, from this point to this point, the slope is very steep. Here, the slope is less steep, and here there is no slope. It is almost horizontal to the x-axis. So we need to linearize the equation so that we get a straight line. Just to linearize it, we can change this equation into its log form, logarithmic form, so that we get a straight line. Is the concept clear to all of you?
Yes, sir.
Great. So that's about it. And in today's class, so there'll be a different way I'll be teaching. Let's keep it more discussive and a little light. I'll be sharing the NCRT because I'm unable to use my graphic pad, unfortunately. So I'll be sharing the NCRT and we'll be scribbling there, and I'll be teaching from there only. Okay, well, is that fine?
Yes, sir.
Cool. So let me share the book with you. Yes, you all can see this. You all can see the
Yes.
not like that. No, I would like it like this. Is it visible to everyone?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this part we have done already. We talked about these different systems. Okay, this one part we left in the last class, which after studying the species area richness and other parameters, now we'll be able to understand better. So everyone can see this diagram. Yeah. So this diagram represents the global diversity. Okay, the diversity of different organisms throughout the planet. So how are you going to read this graph? Can anyone try to explain what do you get from this graph? Anyone would like to give a try? Sumaira, anything that you understand from this graph? No? Okay. So one thing which is straightforward is, I hope you all can appreciate. So these kind of graphs are called pie chart. I hope you all can also see my cursor. See if I can annotate the graph. Yes, I can, I think. Yeah, great. So this kind of graphs are called pie chart graphs. And what does pie charts represent is the fraction of the total, just like a slice of pie. So in this pie chart, insects, so there is invertebrates, vertebrates, and plants, different kind of species whose global biodiversity is represented. So whenever we have to represent a population and a fraction of population which is different from other population, we use pie charts. We can also use histograms for this analysis, but this is more clear. So you can appreciate that in invertebrates, more than 75%, because 3/4 of this pie chart will be 75%, correct? If I just divide the pie chart like this, the 3/4 will be 75%, 25% each, correct? So more than 75% is just insects in case of invertebrates. In case of vertebrates, almost half is fish, various species of fish. Okay. So we have, if you exclude invertebrates, among the vertebrates, there are around 20, around 30,000 species of fish, including both marine water fish and freshwater fish. Okay. Amphibians are relatively lower, and also higher mammals are low in species diversity because of two reasons. Amphibians are low because amphibians need both water and land for their life cycle. So amphibians are limited by the availability of water around land. So organisms which are not limited by like any limiting factor in the ecosystem flourish more. This is the general trend. Insects, because they can even survive in drier conditions, moist conditions, sometimes in colder conditions where they just go into hibernation, so they survive more. Mammals, because they are the most of the mammals mostly are either the apex predators, or in the food chain they come up higher. Even if they are consumers, primary consumers, they come like they are big in size. You will find reptiles and birds more after fish. In case of plants, the two extremes of angiosperms and fungi, they are the most abundant in a number. Fungi, because fungi are detritivorous, they are saprophytes, right? You know saprophytes, people?
Yes.
Yeah. So fungi are important in any ecosystem, especially in a forest ecosystem, because they rely on dead and decaying matter. Okay. So when trees fall in a forest, those trees needs to be decomposed, and these fungi take over trees, the dead and dying trees, uprooted trees, and just grow all over it and digest it. Angiosperms are primary producers. They are the most abundant plants in the ecosystem. You remember we were studying evolution, there was a chart, a kind of a branching pattern chart, that's called dendrogram, kind of, for animals and plants that we studied. Remember, their angiosperm was the widest, the broadest of the lines. Anyone remember that? And I told you that most of the plants on the planet currently are angiosperms, the species. So they are flowering plants, and they also produce the most oxygen and starch in the ecosystem. Lichens are least abundant among the plants because they're actually not true plants, but there are a relationship between fungi and algae. And lichens are also getting more and more rare in ecosystem, because lichens are a pollution indicator. They cannot grow and survive in polluted environments, and most of the urban areas where humans live is polluted to some or the other extent, but we have polluted environments. So untouched wilderness, or the untouched farms, or even rural areas, lichens are getting more and more rare. Ferns, mosses, again for the same reason, they're also less abundant. Algae are still abundant, but because if you see the proportion, because they are most of the time they are unicellular or very simple organisms, the simplest of the plants, they do not account for most of the biomass. Okay. So are these three charts clear to all of you?
Yes.
Any doubts here? Okay. So these are representative charts, so no absolute number. You also don't have to remember this chart, just remember the trend. Okay, so let's write down a few trends that you have to remember. Write down. Among the invertebrates, insects constitute the highest proportion of biodiversity. Insects constitute the highest proportion of biodiversity. And overall also, and overall in animal species also, insects are the insects has the highest diversity. Insects have the highest diversity. Is that clear?
Yes.
9. Among vertebrates, among vertebrates, fish cons- uh, constitutes almost half of the diversity. Fish constitutes of almost half of the diversity. And mammals, birds, reptiles, and amphibians makes the other half. Mammal, birds, reptiles, and amphibians makes the other half. And let's come to plants now. Write down in plants. So we know that as per 5 kingdom classification, fungi have their own kingdom fungi, right? Because they share some characteristics with plants, but the other, which are cellular characteristics, with animals. So they neither fit in both. But here, for the purpose of biodiversity, we are keeping it in plants category because they're more closely associated with plants. Is that okay, everyone? Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, or to be more clear, in your exams, you can write that in plants, angiosperms have the highest biodiversity in the ecosystem, in all ecosystems. In plants, angiosperms have the highest biodiversity in all ecosystems where plants are found. Okay. And just write a separate line which states that fungi also have a very high diversity globally. Fungi also have a very high biodiversity globally. Fungi is so common that you will find fungi around you everywhere. The spores are literally everywhere. That's the reason, even if you keep a roti or a bread piece lying anywhere in the open, you will get rhizopus on it, right? That's a fungi. Fungal infections happens in moist and damp woods in our houses. That's why they need to be polished and cleaned always. Any structure, building, house, or room, if left unattended and closed for many months, the next time when you will go inside, you will find that the walls and all these damp and moist places have been taken over by fungi. Correct? Yes? No?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. That's why fungi is very, very high in biodiversity. There are so mushrooms, right? So there are edible fungi also. Mushrooms, not all mushrooms are edible. Some are very, very poisonous, but some mushrooms are audible. Sorry, edible. And these edible mushrooms are cultured and grown in like what do you say, a greenhouse kind of setup, even in warm temperature, you can grow mushrooms, which people eat. But this specific mushroom, which is shown as a cartoon version here, which has red polka dots on white mushroom, these are very, very poisonous. So in nature, one thing you will appreciate is very bright colors like red, orange, yellow, especially. They are always warning signs, right? Warning signs for the predators or for other organisms that see I'm poisonous. Don't dare you don't dare to eat me. So a lot of these fungi um, are poisonous. Okay, great. So now I'll be talking about the. So we have talked about patterns of biodiversity already. I wanted to just discuss this graph, and today we'll be mostly talking about what are the reasons for loss of biodiversity and why should we care at all. So this question that we should conserve biodiversity, we should protect biodiversity, but why? What's the problem? Just because we are human, we have a moral obligation to also protect other life forms, we are doing it, or are we actually, even for selfish motives, we have to protect biodiversity? If biodiversity is not protected, then we are not safe, the planet is not safe, and humans cannot survive in isolation. So first, that what is leading to loss of biodiversity? So it's a very simple question with a simple answer, but the answer has lots and lots of layers of complexity, but it's simple. We are losing biodiversity because of human activities. Okay. Now, what are these human activities and why are we losing biodiversity? We are going to discuss a little bit. So we know about the list of organisms that is maintained. Some organisms are, according to the list, it's called IUCN's Red List. You know IUCN? What is IUCN? People? Yes. So I think I makes sense. It's international.
International Union for
Huh?
Conservation of Nature.
Correct. It's International Union for Conservation of Nature and also natural resources. Okay, so the N stands for both nature and natural resources. So IUCN has a red list, which was first, no, like not first, but the latest one was documented in 2004. And most of these species on this IUCN's red list are endangered or about to get extinct, and we are making lots of efforts to conserve them. So there are around 780 plus species which are at the verge of extinction. And most importantly, it includes both vertebrates and invertebrates and also plants. Now, around 25% of our medicines, just to give you a rough context that why we need to conserve nature. So all the medicines that are available in the market for every disease, okay, or for every condition, around 25% of those medicines rely on extracts that we get from plants, one or the other kind of plant species. So these natural extracts are taken from plants to prepare that. So if we lose plants diversity, we will also be losing our grip on lots of drug development. It's true that nowadays we can develop drugs synthetically in the labs, and probably one of the reasons why this synthetic biochemistry is also picking up is because we know that we might lose this battle of conserving species, like all the species at least. So talking about some causes, so these are the theoretical part. You can just um, write certain points down. So some causes, and most of them are again deep rooted with human activities. First is habitat loss and fragmentation, the most or the major cause of mm, species going extinct or dying completely. So by habitat loss, it's simple that we are losing the forest cover on the planet. Okay. And if we talk about rainforests, which are the most, uh, what do you say, rich kind of forests. So we can have different kind of forests, deciduous, temperate, evergreen, and there are some rainforests. So rainforest has the highest density of species richness, including amphibians, birds, mammals, reptiles, everything. So the tropical rainforests, which is present again between the Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn. In the last unit, I told you that tropics has very high species density, and these rainforests were around 14 to 15% of the Earth's land surface. Okay, and in less than 100 years, which is just in 1 century, we have reduced it to just 6%. So losing tropical rainforest and knowing that tropics has the highest concentration of species diversity, you can just imagine how much species we are also losing. Make sense?
Yes.
And why are we losing tropical rainforest? Because if tropical conditions are good for animals and plants, it is also the most suitable condition for human existence. So humans don't want to live in Antarctica or Iceland or Greenland that much that they want to live in the tropics. Okay, everyone wants to go to Maldives and enjoy. No one wants to go to Antarctica to enjoy. That's the reason. So we are expanding cities, we are making new cities, we are expanding agricultural fields because again, agriculture of these crops can also be done better in tropics. So we are cutting down forests to make all these things, our own homes and crop fields. That's why this forest cover is getting destroyed faster. And this is a very interesting thing that NCERT has written, that by the time you finish reading this chapter, 1000 hectares of rainforest would have been lost. Okay, so yes, that is the rate at which we are losing forests. And nowadays there is a lot of resistance from not just organizations but from many countries which are pushing uh, communities and the world unions to conserve nature a lot. And fragmentation simply means sometimes between two forests, like there was a one big forest patch, but we made a highway or a civilization or a crop field or a village establishment or a town establishment between that forest patch. So the forest got fragmented. So due to fragmentation also, the easy migration of animals that used to happen does not happen anymore. And because of that, many things like um, reproduction, nutrition, seasonal movement of animals get hampered and then they die. Okay. So that's also leads to species extinction. So is habitat loss and fragmentation clear, everyone? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So next is overexploitation. Again, the whole point is save or conserve nature is from nature. Now, human always depend on nature, right? But point is sometimes we accelerate that exploitation. So from need we go into the greed category, you know, and that leads to problems and that leads to extinctions. For example, if you over exhaust or you overdo the fishing from the oceans and the rivers, so fish provide an important source of like important food source, an important source of vitamin and essential minerals that you do not get from that you do not get so much from the natural, sorry, the vegetarian sources. But if you are overfishing, so you are exploiting the fisheries, that leads to bad fish population or unhealthy fish population that is growing, or a unbalanced ecology or unbalanced aquatic ecosystem. And ecosystems are very very sensitive. They seem like everything is just in its place, but if you remove one component, the others collapse very fast. So we see that many, there is a big problem now happening due to pollution and temperature shift and acidity in the coral reefs. Australia is known for its coral reefs. It's a island continent and an island ecosystem which is surrounded by coral reefs. You know what is coral reef, everyone? Yep. So those coral reefs that seem very vibrant, colorful, with lots and lots of species interaction happening, just because of one species loss, which is a kind of big fish species, which is a predator species, because of over exploitation again and pollution combined, the whole coral reef now is at stake. So Australia's coral reef is dying at a very rapid pace. So presently, as this book says, presently many marine fish populations around the world are over harvested, endangering the continued existence. Okay, so these tuna, hilsa, rohu, katla, these freshwater and marine water, all these fish that is very much needed, is commercially important, may not survive for very long as a population. So that's so first cause is habitat loss and fragmentation. Second is overexploitation. Third, sometimes due to human interventions, in order to, you know, it can come as thoughtful or uh, not well thought actions of human, that foreign species invade region. So alien species invasions are can be very harmful. Okay, so whenever a species is introduced from somewhere to some other place, a proper research, a proper logical modeling of how the ecosystem will behave in the presence of that organism should be done. Otherwise, there are many examples where an alien species was introduced and it led to the destruction of the ecosystem, or it took over the ecosystem. It invaded so fast, then it just almost ruined. So some examples that are given is, um, in your book, is of the Nile perch. Okay, so Nile perch, these species were introduced into the Lake Victoria in East Africa. They thought that maybe introducing this species to this lake will help the ecosystem, but instead what it does, it led to um, around 200 species of this cichlid fish. cichlid fish, whatever it is pronounced as, in that lake. So this lake had a very cichlid, cichlids. So this lake had a very high diversity of these fish. And when the Nile perch, this fish was introduced into the lake, it led to the extinction of around 200 species, the native species in that lake. Okay. Another example, you must also be very familiar with carrot grass. Parthenium. In India, it's so invasive that in North India, you go to any public park where you just allow grasses to grow, you will see that Parthenium or carrot grass is growing everywhere. So it's like a very invasive grass, or it's not a grass actually, it's a small plant. So it's a very invasive plant. It does not allow other grasses to grow. And interesting thing is that this weed, which is called carrot grass, it is called carrot grass because it's a very small miniature version of a carrot. So if you see in a carrot plant, the leaves of a carrot has a peculiar structure. So these weed also have the grasses that are also have the leaves that look like a carrot, but a shorter, very small version. Now you know how did this carrot grass came to India? It's not from India. It's from United States. It's a North American species. It came during the 50s and 60s when India used to import wheat from US. So along with the wheat, we got this grass also. And then it infested our lands, our crop fields, and also our normal forest areas and also parks at a very fast rate. So Parthenium, okay. Another example in plants is Lantana or water hyacinth. Water hyacinth also is known as Bengal terror. So Britishers introduced water hyacinth because in Europe, water hyacinth is in the lake, and in those temperate conditions, water hyacinth grows differently. It makes the lake look beautiful. But the Britishers thought, okay, now we are living in India, so Kolkata is known for its lakes, the beauty. There's a lot of lakes there, so they introduced this water hyacinth in lake, invasive species. And water hyacinth spread so fast in tropical countries because the conditions here are so suitable for growth that it covers the whole surface area of the water. And because of that, all the aquatic life which is inside, like inside the water, that suffers. So that these aquatic life, which include fish, crustaceans, algae, etc., they don't get enough sunlight. They also don't get enough oxygen, which is dissolved. Do you understand? So this water hyacinth, which is like green leaves floating at the surface of water, they are not very good for the lake ecosystem in India or in tropical conditions. But these are some examples where alien species invaded and ruined the ecosystem. Okay. In animals, there is an illegal introduction of African catfish. So African catfish, people like to keep them in aquariums. So, and they are sold at very high prices. They look very beautiful in the aquarium. So people illegally imported it from Africa's continent and started, um, culturing it in our lakes and rivers, and they just proved to be invasive species that affected the other organisms in the ecosystem. Okay, make sense, everyone?
Yes, sir.
And the fourth factor and the last factor, major factor that you have to study is co-extinctions. Just like when an alien species invade, it causes a lot of harm. The other way around is also true. Sometimes when we try to remove one species from somewhere, suppose because of human actions, one species got extinct. So we might think that, okay, we just lost one species, what's the big deal? But many species live with interactions. In the last chapter only, we studied about population interactions. And if we lose one species, the other associated species which live with that in an obligatory manner, they also become extinct. Okay. For example, two species are in a mutualistic relationship. So if one dies, the other also dies. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So this always happens in case of plants, because plants have evolved with their pollinators in a very strong mutualistic manner. So if due to factors like pollution, radiation in the atmosphere, or increasing heat, sudden fluctuations in environment, or droughts and famines, if we get rid of, or not rid of, if we lose insect species, then we might also lose our crops. We might also lose many plants, because these insects were very crucial to pollinate those plants and continue those plant species as well. So now, in the absence of these insects, the plants cannot pollinate. Many of our crops are pollinated by insects. Okay. So if we lose these insects, we might also lose a major fraction of productivity of our crops. Make sense? So that's called co-extinction. Okay. Any doubt till here?
No, sir.
No. Okay. So now we come to the conservation part. So we understood biodiversity. So just a quick recap till now. We understood biodiversity, how diverse invertebrates, vertebrates, and plants in general are. We also understood the patterns of biodiversity. What are the two theories? The latitudinal gradient and the species area richness theory. These, and we also understood that how is biodiversity, what are the major causes of biodiversity loss. After this, the next second part of this chapter is, now knowing the problem, we have to solve it. The only way to fix this problem is to conserve biodiversity. So make solid rigid rules and policies with which do not allow the biodiversity to go extinct or go down. Now, the question comes, why should we conserve biodiversity? Some of this we have already discussed. And so the two questions, why and how? These are the last two parts of this chapter, which we will discuss and finish today. So the why part is more or less clear. Okay. Why? Because we depend on the biodiversity. Now, there are two major themes of why. One is the narrow utility argument. So you just write down. And they have also included ethical arguments here, ethical reasons, because ethical argument, I don't think make much of sense when people start exploiting environment, but still for moral value of it, we study it in books. So ethical argument says that every organism has a right to live. Philosophically and spiritually, our cultures, our religions have grown around, you know, respecting the existence of every living system. We have a moral duty to take care of other biological organisms as well. So these are all we have to, as a human species, we have to realize that we are one of the earthlings. We have other earthlings, which are, all these ethical moral values. That's why the reason they have just written 6 lines here is because what makes more sense is that we should also, apart from the moral value of it, of course, we should have moral values without which humans are just as wild as animals. But it's also important to conserve biodiversity based on pure and plain logic. So two major arguments that we will be talking about is narrow utility argument and broad utility argument. Okay. Now, what does the narrow utility argument says? That there are many things which we depend for which we depend on ecosystem for our narrow utility. Now, narrow utility means even if there is no counterpart of that. Okay. And even if we found counterparts, um, it will be difficult for us to shift uh, permanently that fast. For example, we derive countless products which are of economic benefit, like cereals, pulses, fruits. Firewood, let's say, no longer is a requirement because we have figured out fossil fuels and other ways to cook food. Fiber also, you can say that we can make synthetic fibers like rayon, nylon. Construction material also we are developing, which are which can be synthetically created, let's say. Tannins, lubricants, dyes, resins, perfumes, they all may be synthetically also produced. So they all constitute for narrow utility. Okay, even without them, we might survive, except for the food part, because you can say that for food, we can have supplements. Again, like in space, we don't carry cereal, pulses, or fruits, but still we survive. But when we come to medicine, around 25, as we talked already, 25% of the drugs are derived from plants. Okay. And not just the uh, synthetic or what we say as allopathic medicines, but also many traditional medicines which are used uh, prominently in many regions of the world. They also depend on native species of plants around the world. So you must be knowing that in every culture there are some medicines and remedies which are not scientifically well studied. Like many remedies in Ayurveda or in Unani therapy are not very well scientifically documented, right? But they work. You agree?
Yes, sir.
So, and very few people who are experts in that field or who know that traditional medicine know about them, not all. So, if we lose that, then our only reliance will be on synthetic drugs that are created. Okay, so we cannot lose them. But still, you can, let's say, if we lose them, we can still rely on the drugs. So that's why that also comes in a narrow utility argument. Okay. In short, we need biodiversity for um, these benefits. Now, the broad utility argument says that biodiversity is a major thing. You cannot mess with that at all. Now, in broad utility, we have to include something which is so important and so broadly related with every part of the life that we cannot survive, one of which is oxygen. Now, you cannot say that if we don't have oxygen enough to breathe, okay, we'll start breathing on nitrogen. No, you can say that in case of, let's say, resins, dyes, fabrics, lubricants, perfumes, or even fruits to some extent, but not in case of oxygen, right? So we know that plants, especially the um, big forest covers, for example, Amazon rainforest, which almost spans half of a continent. Okay, it produces around 20% of the total oxygen on the Earth's atmosphere alone, the Amazon rainforest. That's why they're also called the lung of the planet, lungs of planet Earth. Okay. Now, oxygen is something, if we start losing plants by large, then the oxygen concentration will decrease, right? And all the life form which respires, which shows aerobic respiration, depend on oxygen for the breakdown of glucose and for the proper oxidative decomposition of the byproducts of glycolysis to produce energy or ATPs in the mitochondria. Agree, everyone? We all heavily rely on oxygen, without which we will die. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And we started realizing the value of oxygen, especially during the pandemic, because one of the severe symptoms of COVID infection was decrease in saturated pressure of oxygen in the blood, SpO2. You must have heard this term SpO2 levels going down a lot, right? Oxygen cylinders were costlier than gold during the pandemic. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So that's one broad utility argument that see, if for nothing, save the forest covers for oxygen. You have to breathe it in. There's no counterpart for that. You cannot synthetically make it and allow everyone to survive. Second is pollination, as I said. So why? Because major pollinators are bees, bumblebees, birds, bats. You know, these are the major pollinators of the ecosystem. And whenever we fiddle with the ecosystem, these are the ones which are more prone to get extinct. Okay. Also, this awareness of understanding the role of a species in the ecosystem has to be made. For example, the virus COVID-19, the SARS-CoV-2, which has created this COVID pandemic. This virus stays as a reservoir, so it uses bats and pangolins as a reservoir, as a host in which it does not cause any disease. So, and we interacting with pangolins for their illegal trade, for their flesh, and with bats because of loss of bats habitat. So bats and humans start living in close approximations, which should not be the case. They eat the same fruit that we also collect and eat. They shit and urine or urinate in our crop fields or on our lands where our food can be there. So all this thing makes humans interact with bats, or if bats are hunted and eaten. So all these things allow these viruses which are living inside bats to just jump the host and start affecting human as a host. So that's called zoonotic spillover, where pathogens which did not used to consider some species as host now starts identifying and affecting these species. So from animals, whenever a disease comes to human, that's called a zoonotic spillover or a zoonotic disease. COVID is one such disease. It's also happening because we do not have now, as a result of which people start having this negative connotation against bats and pangolins, that we should kill bats, we should get rid of bats. But we have to understand that anything that causes disease to human, we cannot eliminate it from the nature. That's not how it works. For example, if mosquito causes malaria, get rid of mosquitoes. But we never know what role mosquitoes in totality, like in how important are mosquitoes for the ecosystem. Clearly, they are not important to us. We don't like them. So we don't like flies also, because they also carry diseases. But anything that we don't like or causes harm to us is not worth getting rid of or completely wiping out from the ecosystem. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So that comes under the broad utility argument. And so pollination, oxygen comes under, because these are, as they call it, intangible benefits. Intangible benefits means which are must. Okay. So you understood the two major arguments. So if the question comes that what are the arguments given in favor of conserving biodiversity, or why should we conserve biodiversity, you have to talk about narrow utility argument and broad utility argument, and also ethical argument in the end. Give some moral lecture in your papers, and also you also learn and absorb it. That's it. Make sense, people?
Sir, can you give in points?
Yes. So let me give you points. Write down why should we conserve biodiversity? Write it as a question. You can write down in brief, explain in brief, explain the arguments in favor of biodiversity conservation. So this is how the question came in one of your exams. In brief, explain. So when they say in brief, remember that you have to give points. And anyways, I encourage you to write your answers as points in boards. Don't write, you know, very lengthy or very short, clumsy paragraphs. Okay. So write down. The arguments in favor of biodiversity conservation. The arguments in favor of biodiversity conservation can be grouped into three categories. Can be grouped into three categories. First, the narrow utilitarian argument. The narrow or narrowly, broad and narrow, it's fine. The narrow utilitarian argument. First point is
Sir, can you repeat?
according to yeah. Hello, am I audible, people? Yeah, I think I lost internet. I'm sorry, I lost internet for some time. You can hear me clearly, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay, sorry. Can you see the screen again?
Yes.
So I will repeat the last point. I was saying that according to the narrow utility argument, humans derive a large number of economically beneficial products. Humans derive a large number of economically beneficial products from nature. Economically beneficial products from nature, including food products, fibers, lubricants, resins, dyes, etc., wood, etc. Woods, etc. Okay. Second, humans also derive medicinally important products. Humans also derive medicinally important products. Third point, write down. These products may not be crucial for human existence. These products may not be crucial for human existence, but govern the are of economic importance. But are of economic, rich or great economic importance. Great will be a better word. Are of great economic importance. So that's the narrow utility argument. Okay, so save it for so that our industries can keep running. Save it so that we keep making profit. It's like that story, you know. Don't be greedy. Save the hen which gives a golden egg, one egg at a time, and you will be rich and prosperous. You understand, people? Is that okay, Saifullah?
Yes, sir.
Second, write down. The second is according to broad utility argument. According to broad utility argument, biodiversity provides ecosystem services. Provide ecosystem services. So it's not about just the goods that we get or the products. It's also the services. Ecosystem services which are crucial for human existence. Which are crucial for human existence. For example, maintaining the total oxygen level in the atmosphere. Maintaining the total oxygen level in the atmosphere. Okay. Second is pollination of pollination of important plants and crops. Pollination of important plants and crops by a wide range of pollinators. By a wide range of pollinators. Okay. And then third, you will write the ethical argument. Ethical argument talks about the philosophical or spiritual value. The philosophical or spiritual value of living systems and their survival. Spiritual value of living systems and their survival. even if they may or may not have any economic value to humans. Even if they may or may not have economical value for humans. Okay, so you can just write one more line that it is a moral duty of humans to conserve or protect other living systems. Okay, are the points clear for this question? That's one important question that can be asked. And if this question comes, the good thing is that they come for 3 or 4 marks. So it's a good bounty point. Clear, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very well. And in the last part of this chapter, I think, yes, this is the last, I think. Yes, it is the last part, is that how to do that, then how we conserve biodiversity. Now, this 3 paragraphs is not the complete answer. There are hundreds of different ways in which people are trying to conserve biodiversity, but majorly all these efforts to conserve biodiversity comes into 2 categories. We can broadly, for example, when we say save tiger, so we don't realize that we are not just saving the tigers. Can you save just the tigers and not the ecosystem, entire forest? So we have to save the entire forest to save the tiger, right? You cannot save tiger in the boxes. That take a tiger, keep it in a box, provide the tiger with food, or give one male and one female so that there can be babies. This is not how tiger saving project can work, correct? We actually have to save the whole ecosystem to save tigers, and this goes for all other kind of species that we want to save. But sometimes when this is not possible in wild, then you might have heard of statements saying that this species is critically endangered in the wild, right? But humans try to save or increase their population number in protected, closed shelters, correct? You understand?
Yes, sir.
So all these efforts can be boiled down to 2 points. One is in situ conservation, which is called on-site conservation. So in situ means where whatever you want to conserve it right where it is. For example, you want to conserve the amphibians of Western Ghat. So go to Western Ghat, put some efforts, money, a team, and try to conserve the species right there in the Western Ghats. That's called on-site conservation or in situ conservation. Do you understand that point?
Yes, sir.
Because it is very important to understand that why certain species are only found in certain regions. And this thing is known as endemism. So I hope you can see here, there's a word written endemism, endemic. Something is endemic, pandemic, endemic. You know about these terms? Pandemic is a disease which is now, corona is pandemic. Before that, there was a MERS that happened in the Middle East. It's called Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, MERS. That was endemic to Middle East. So endemism is where a species of anything, a pathogen, virus, bacteria, plant, animal, bird, reptile, it can only survive in a particular region. So if you try to take it out from there and protect it somewhere else, for example, let's say someday, if we want to conserve camel population, can we take camels from deserts and take it to, Italy and conserve them, or France and conserve them?
No.
No, we cannot do that, right? To conserve camels, we have to conserve camels in their habitat. We have to conserve desert ecosystem, correct? Similarly, and Western Ghats and Eastern Ghats, Himalayas, many things that grow in Himalaya only grow in Himalaya, including plants and animals. So we do this kind of conservation where we make such regions which are called biosphere reserves, okay, or national parks or wildlife sanctuaries, which helps us to protect and conserve biodiversity right where it is. Okay, and they are commonly they are known as sacred groves, because people, a lot of tribal people live around these forests, and governments all across around the globe realized that the best way to save forests is to save it with the natives. Talk to the people, the native tribes who are living in that forest, depending on the communities are depending on the forest and to help, right? So there's an effort to understand the relationship between human and forests and seek the help of these tribals to conserve the forest. That's called in situ conservation through sacred groves or national parks, sanctuaries, etc. The other is called ex situ conservation. Now, in this approach, animals and plants which are very, very threatened in the wild, like just one or two or few are left. So you have to take them out from their natural habitat, put them in a protected environment, give special care, try to mate them, try to get their eggs and babies, try to raise them in a completely offset condition, like completely off-site condition. So this kind of conservation is called ex situ or off-site conservation. This is only the last refuge in cases where organisms are very, very threatened. For example, do you know about these northern white rhinoceros from Sudan? The last male of that species died last year. And before it died, what scientists did is they took that northern rhinoceros sperm and has stored it in the hope, because there are still some females which are not of age of reproduction, but there are two females, I think, which are so like this male's daughters only. So when they will reach the age, there will be no male to mate. So they will use that last male sperm in a ex situ conservation approach with these females, and if it works, we can maybe, you know, repopulate or bring back the northern white rhinoceros population. Okay, so these kind of efforts are called ex situ conservation. Make sense, people? Everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So that's all. I think that these are some facts about where was the Earth Summit held in 1992, which was the first one where biological diversity decisions were taken, and in 2002. So you don't need to worry about all of these facts much, but keep an eye, look for very recent facts, because this NCERT gives you for 2002 and 2010. It has also happened after that. So when and where that has happened, just search on internet and know a little bit about it. And that's all. So this is what this chapter talks about. And from the next class, we will be starting our last chapter for the syllabus, and we'll be moving towards completion. So please revise as much as you can and ask your doubts in the next class. So this is where I end the class today with this chapter. If you have any doubts, please ask.
Sir,
The
can you
last
give
chapter is
points for
deleted,
this?
right?
Sorry? Yes, Minashi, first you. What?
The last chapter is deleted, right?
Is it completely deleted
Yeah.
from the... Oh, that's okay. But let's do one thing. Let's because that chapter still contains some points that may be valuable for your entrances. So in the next class, I will take those points, okay? If not the whole chapter. And then the next couple of classes will be just for taking any doubt or any topic from any chapter from 1 to 15 where you find difficulty. We can do that, okay? Yes, Saifullah, what were you saying?
Sir, can you give points for...
In situ and ex situ conservation?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so in situ you can write down. It's simple. So write down in situ conservation is just known as on-site conservation. Okay. In situ conservation is called on-site conservation. And it is where the whole ecosystem has to be conserved together. Whole ecosystem has to be conserved together to conserve individual components of it. To conserve individual components of it. You can give example from this Western Ghats hotspot. Three points for each, in situ and ex situ. That's it. Okay, and for ex situ, and you can also just write one more point here, that in India, how do we do it? In India, we have biosphere reserves, we have national parks and sanctuaries. No need to remember the exact numbers, but know that in situ conservation is done through biosphere reserves, national parks, and sanctuaries. For example, if you want to conserve specifically tiger, there is a tiger reserve. For example, in India, there is Kanha Tiger Reserve, but it doesn't mean that Kanha forest only protects tigers. It protects everything which is there in the forest. You know, from a rabbit to a mole to a deer to a cattle to a tiger to plants, everything. So this is how in situ conservation is done through biosphere reserves, national park, and sanctuaries. In ex situ, right, different 4 points. Like in this approach, this could be your first point. In this approach, you can underline it in the book only. In this approach, threatened animals and plants are taken out from their natural habitat and conserved in special settings. Okay, so in situ are reserves, national park, and sanctuaries, and ex situ are zoos, zoological parks, botanical gardens, and wildlife safari parks. Remember